So let's take a look at editing color in Lightroom and the different opportunities and things that can happen. So I've already got this picture open of chalks at the art store last week. And I want to take a look at just what happens when we're looking at the tool, the light tools, okay? So if I go and I go exposure down, there's no reason to make this picture darker, but if I wanted to make it darker, the colors will get darker. And at some point in here, the colors almost look a little bit more saturated or more intense. The blue looks bluer, yellows look yellower. If I go further, then it becomes just too dark. But when you're playing with exposure, there are what I would call like a sweet spot where just darkening things a little bit looks really good. If I go in the other direction, bright, on a picture like this, it just blows everything out. So there wasn't anything to get better when I looked at it under negative exposure. I'm going to go back and hit that 0 to make it normal again. Okay, if I go to contrast, if I pump the contrast up, colors get brighter, whites get whiter, darks get darker. And what I'm noticing when I look at this is that some of these light areas on the white or the pink chalks, the light blue chalks, they actually lose detail. So while things look crisper, I don't really think that things got better. If I go in the opposite direction and I lower the contrast, everything gets a little bit duller and softer. And again, that might look really good. You might be trying to do a more muted, softer picture. If I take all the contrast out of it, then everything looks sort of ashy. So another option you can play with is, what do things look like when I drop or raise contrast just a little bit? Okay, highlights. If I take the highlights way up, bright areas get way brighter and they lose detail. Sometimes if I bring them down, this has nothing to do with color. This just has to do with detail and exposure. So highlights improve, but colors don't necessarily change. Same thing's going to happen with shadows, darken things. So some of those colors pop out a little bit more, or they fade a little bit. They get a little bit, there's less difference between color and shadow areas. So shadows is something I would leave on the 0. Whites, very similar effect to what happens with highlights. Brighter, darker. Blacks, same thing. Darks get darker, dark tones get darker, shadows get darker, or they open up. So you're going to see very similar results between shadows and blacks, highlights and whites.